But unless you have a relationship that's based on trust and confidence, it's very hard to achieve optimum legal outcomes. I see crime as a symptom of the sickness that's produced by our society. I really believe that legal outcomes we get are a direct reflection of the work that we invest in order to obtain them. Whatever it is that you choose to do with your life, make sure you care about it. Do it with heart. Do it so that it matters.
Welcome to Counselor Beyond Conventional Defense.
Hello and welcome to Counselor Beyond Conventional Defense, the podcast that challenges the traditional approach to criminal defense and takes a deeper look at how the justice system can evolve with attorney William Pernik, a trailblazer in criminal defense whose approach is anything but conventional. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and as always, I am joined by William Pernik. William, great to see you.
It's great to see you, Kevin. Thank you.
So in this podcast, it's all about exploring how criminal defense can and should address the root causes behind a client's legal troubles. In an earlier episode, Emily shared how her brother's unjust sentencing inspired her to become a lawyer. Let's dive deeper into what we can learn from stories like this. So reflecting on Emily's story, her brother's case was a tragic example of poor legal representation. From your perspective, what were the key failures in that attorney's approach, and how does your model of representation avoid these pitfalls?
First of all, Kevin, I don't think that attorney actually cared to understand the reasons behind why Emily's brother got in trouble. He was a young man who was kind of lost, who was hanging out with other young adults. He decided to accept responsibility, it appeared from what Emily told us, for crimes that he himself did not fully commit. And as a result, he ended up with a far harsher punishment than what he probably deserved. It was his first time in trouble, first serious offense. And while the crimes were no doubt severe, this individual ended up losing 20 years of his life for his very first experience with the criminal justice system. And I think that's draconian. That's heartless. That's absolutely inappropriate. It's catastrophic for the family and for the client. Now, when Emily actually becomes a lawyer, when she obtains the attorney's file and she sees how little work, how little creative thought went into it, I think she was really disheartened by it. And that's why she has such strong feelings about lawyers who take people's money, who don't really care about them, who don't provide good work. But I think what I tried to do, building on what Emily shared with us, is I tried to go a little bit deeper. And I tried to explore what are the philosophical differences between lawyers, what are the different types of legal representation that people provide. And I think what's really important is to ensure that the type of lawyer that the family of a young person like Emily's brother needs is the actual lawyer they're hiring. Some individuals are transactional by nature. All they care about is getting paid. They believe that they're providing a specific service and they're receiving specific compensation for it, as opposed to looking at the legal situation faced by someone like Emily's brother more holistically and trying to figure out what happened in the life of this young person that so dramatically changed its trajectory and led him to become the person that he's become, led him to getting wrapped up in the criminal justice system, caused him to get arrested for a string of robberies. So I think fundamentally the failure was in trying to understand the client and the client's background. If you do not connect with the client and do not understand where your client comes from, you're going to have a hard time explaining to your prosecutor, to your judge, why your client must be treated differently from everyone else. Our criminal justice system is a machine. It's a machine that has to churn out repeatable, predictable outcomes thousands of times a year in every criminal department. So unless you make your client stand out, unless you can somehow illustrate how your client is differently situated from everybody else's clients, you're going to get the same predictable, repeatable outcome. And that's what happened to this young man. Without any creativity, they probably didn't have much in terms of legal challenges to the case. It doesn't appear that they were presenting much in terms of factual defenses. So all they were left with is negotiating a little bit on the topic of sentence, as opposed to truly trying to figure out what can be done to address the reasons why this young man got in trouble, and then persuading the district attorney and the judge that their solution to the problems that led to this behavior is better than this very lengthy incarceration. There's no guarantee it would have spared him the 20-year term, but it could have provided an explanation, for example, for why he's not cooperating with the government and snitching out all of his friends. You could have provided an explanation that this is a young man who is still not fully developed. We know from the science of adolescent brain development that young people act impulsively, they have poor judgment, they're really susceptible to peer pressure. You could have explained safety concerns when it comes to somebody providing information to the government in a case where multiple people are involved. There could have been a lot more done. There could have been discussions with the young client to explain to the young client the consequences of him choosing to maintain a particular position in litigation as opposed to perhaps taking a different position. And I'm not saying necessarily come to court and become a snitch, but perhaps explain a little bit better a person's reasoning so an assumption isn't made that he's just there to protect his criminal buddies, but instead an understanding of why a young adult might feel reluctant to provide additional information or to present himself differently. I think that sometimes you deal with a situation when the lawyer is just not very good or not competent. Sometimes you deal with a situation where a lawyer is transactional by nature and just views it as a paid for service. And other times you're dealing with a situation where an attorney truly acts as a counselor and provides guidance and advice in addition to representation. And I think when you work with young offenders like Emily's brother, the latter model is ideal. And that's how we would have handled a case like this. And I think we would have tried much, much harder to understand what happened, how it can be prevented in the future. And if you provide a reason when you approach negotiations in this case, when you approach litigation in this case, with reason, with understanding, you usually get far better legal outcomes. At least more effort needed to be made for sure.
We've talked on this show before about the special nature of the attorney-client relationship and the importance of trust and transparency. In your opinion, what went wrong in this example of Emily's brother and his family, and how do you build that relationship, especially with clients who may be skeptical or even traumatized by the justice system?
I think first of all, you need to understand that you're dealing with a young adult. So when you're dealing with a person in early 20s, as opposed to a client in his or her 30s or 40s, you're going to be dealing with an impulsive individual who does not fully have the capacity to reason the same way as an older, more mature client would, someone who is more susceptible to peer pressure, somebody who is now sitting in jail, listening to his cellmates, listening to everybody in a gang pod. If you have a client who is arrested on gang charges or suspected gang charges or has gang past connections and has been housed in a gang area at the jail, because instead of you being the only legal advisor, you now have 27 additional legal advisors telling the person what to do, what to say, how to act, what not to say, how not to act. And you have to understand the difficult environment that your client is in. You have to put in the time to get to know your client, not only in your in-person visits, but in actually taking the time to think about who your client is. What is your client about? Why is your client doing or saying the things that he or she is doing or saying? And why would your client choose to not do certain things that are so obvious, so beneficial for them? And without engaging in these processes, all you're really doing is buying and selling freedom, frankly. You're just dealing in transactions that affect how much time people spend in custody. The district attorney gives you a number, you give them a lower number, and the two of you go back and forth a little bit until you reach a compromise. But we're dealing with human beings. We're not buying and selling cows. We're not buying and selling cars. And so we have to treat it as such. With a young client, you need to put in the time to understand the client, to connect with the client. You have to figure out how to talk to a client. Sometimes I think about, what am I going to say when I see my client today in jail? How am I going to approach my conversation with him? Am I going to talk about current events? Am I going to talk about sports? Am I going to talk about family? I really like leaning on personal experiences in order to allow clients to relate to me better and to find some similarities in my background. So I really like to reach deep into my past when I was the same age as this person, maybe share some stories of stupid things that I have done and break the ice that way. But unless you have a relationship that's based on trust and confidence, it's very hard to achieve optimum legal outcomes. And we have to tell the clients that. We have to tell them that, look, you have a unique opportunity to tell me anything you want right now. And it's going to be 100% secret between you and I. Unless you tell me you're about to kill somebody and I believe you that somebody else's life is in danger, I am required to keep all of our communications in complete and total confidence. So you have an opportunity to really talk to me the way you might not want to talk to your girlfriend, the way you might not want to talk to your cellmate, definitely not want to talk to your judge or your DA or your probation officer or your parents. And so you become, in some ways, their counselor, their confidant. And once you start having these conversations, and they don't all need to be about the facts of the case, they can be about the facts of life, the facts of their life,
Mhm.
your life. Once you begin to engage and interact as human beings and not just attorney and client, you see much better results. I think it opens a window for far greater communication and relatability. And then you have to be there with your eyes and ears open, so when the window opens, you can use it to approach your client and start asking tough questions, start having conversations. And we also have an opportunity to be role models to people. They don't interact with a lot of people who have master's degrees or doctoral degrees, people who had 20 plus years of schooling without being in jail or in prison. A lot of the role models in their lives are very, very poor examples of what, for example, a young man should be. And so they look at us, they pay attention. The way we talk to them, the way we give them advice, that could make a difference. Maybe in their case at this time, maybe down the road. And so I think we need to use that as an opportunity to set the right tone, to provide the right modeling, and hopefully somewhere it will stick and it will make a connection. None of that happened in Emily's brother's case, by the way.
Many clients are hoping for that magic bullet solution. How do you balance honesty about possible outcomes while still giving them hope in their case?
When I was a young lawyer, I had an opportunity to work with many lawyers of previous generation. And one of them was an older public defender named Lisa, who said something I never forgot. And Lisa would always tell me, William, remember, any case can be won and any case can be lost. And I really believe that to be true. I also think the definition of winning and losing is dynamic. It's not static. It's not set in stone. Sometimes a win in a case is getting probation when your client is supposed to go to prison for a double-digit sentence. Sometimes a win is getting a dismissal. Sometimes a win is getting your client help and treatment and having them complete a program and be clean and sober for the first time in many, many years and get reunited with their family. So what I believe is that there are no hopeless cases. There are only unimaginative and hopeless lawyers. And I think it's really important to think about your case. And if you think hard, if you truly try to understand what happened in the case, what are the respective bargaining positions of the parties, what are the respective legal issues, factual issues, answers appear to you. Remember, we're talking of going beyond the conventional defense. We're not just transacting in facts and the law that applies to those facts. So once we're looking at the reasons why something happened, almost always you can discover what's the right solution. And that's the conversation that I would have with my client. And I would say, look, let's have a conversation about how you ended up here. Okay. What happened that led you to be involved in a string of robberies? And then the client says, I'm sorry, I started hanging out with these guys. They dragged me into this. I couldn't say no. We were all high. We were all smoking weed. We were doing other things. There were girls involved. We needed to come up so we could bring money, so we could buy, more drugs or alcohol or whatever. And so then you say, okay, so here are the things that I hear from you that caused you to be involved in this. Let's think about how we can address it so that we can come up with some solutions that I can discuss with the judge, that I can discuss with the prosecutor. As a matter of fact, just this morning, I had a conversation with the judge and with the prosecutor where my client was offered a complete dismissal of a number of felony charges, but a plea to a number of misdemeanors. Any other lawyer would say, great, felonies are done, misdemeanor plea, case is over, I've earned my money, my client gets to go home. But I knew that my client had underlying substance abuse and mental health issues. So even though I just received a good settlement offer, I had to say, Your Honor, Mr. or Miss Prosecutor, I really appreciate it. Objectively, of course, it's a good offer. But my fear is that unless we do more, unless we provide some additional treatment, unless we use one of these diversion programs that, yes, down the road, it could result in a dismissal, all we're doing with this young person is setting them up to fail because their case is going to be over. There's going to be no supervision. Conviction will be on their record. Technically, they will be on probation. And it's only a matter of time before potentially another offense will be committed.
Hmm.
Let's do it better. There is a better way. And I think you need to think about your cases in that way in order to get better outcomes. And if you do, greater outcomes are attainable. You have to be honest with the client. I always tell clients, look, I have an idea for how we can do it. I don't want to lie to you. It's not going to be easy. There's no guarantee that it will work. However, it's a very narrow path to victory. This is what I think your objective is in this case. I think we can get there potentially. Let's try it this way. This is what it's going to require from you. Are you willing to put in the hard work? Are you willing to do the treatment? Are you willing to talk to a counselor? Are you willing to see a mental health professional? Are you willing to relocate so you're no longer hanging out with the same people? Are you willing to stay, with your parents and not hang out with your buddies who are gang connected? Whatever the circumstances are specific to the client's situation, those are the things that we would do.
You've mentioned discussing your model with other attorneys, even a close friend who argued that it's not economically viable because it turns clients into non-repeat customers. How do you respond to that critique?
I reject it. I think it's a fundamentally flawed way to look at it. I think that to tell an attorney that trying to help your clients address underlying issues that got them in trouble in the first place is non economically viable is kind of like telling a doctor that it's not economically viable to provide really good medical advice, because if you cure all of their diseases and all of their problems, your patients are not going to come back to you and you're going to make less money. I don't look at it that way. The way I see it, I see crime as a symptom of the sickness that's produced by our society. I think crime has always been there and it will always be a part of society. And so I'm not worried that I'm going to be able to fix every single person and run out of customers in the future. I think that there are countless people, many, many, many more people than we can help, that are out there who are so desperate for help. And so if I have an opportunity to make a change in someone's life, I don't think it's appropriate for me to think about it in terms of how much money am I going to lose if I fix their problems and they don't commit crimes in the future and don't come back to me. I just think it's a really inappropriate reasoning. I think the correct way to look at it is that we have an opportunity while these people are in our lives and we're in their lives to diagnose and identify the problem that led to their involvement in the justice system in the first place. If we do that, we can provide them with far greater legal outcome and ensure that they're not only getting off in this case, but potentially will not have another case ever again. I think it's morally right. I think it's legally appropriate and necessary. And I think it's the right thing to do. And I think in terms of economics, it has not affected my practice. In fact, since the day I opened my practice, it's grown by a factor of 10. So the free market has been a very good judge of it. And we're getting more and more referrals from people who have gone through rehabilitation, who have experienced the benefit of something that we're doing, who have been success examples as a result of the approach we're taking. And I don't plan to change that. It did impact our firm in some ways economically. We did end up with, a higher number of customers and clients, I think, than our initial staffing was budgeted for, because obviously if you're taking 2 years to fix a person's problem and make sure they achieve a complete dismissal, as opposed to just going to court and settling the case in a second or third court appearance, you're going to have a lot more work. So we had to develop systems. We had to consolidate resources. We had to become a lot more efficient with a lot of things that we do. We had to hire an in-house investigator because we couldn't tolerate delays with investigation, for example. We had to develop our own network of mental health providers, therapists, forensic experts, and we had to hire more staff. So we are set up now to accommodate this need. I recognize that a solo practitioner who, is running a one person or 2-person shop may have some difficulties, but that shouldn't stop people from doing the right thing. You can adjust it in how you, obviously quote, clients' fee for the work performed, but that doesn't mean you should allow your client to settle for a lesser outcome. I think that's just wrong.
Emily's family, they felt left in the dark. What systems do you have in place to keep your clients informed and empowered throughout the whole process?
We have wonderful staff. We have a private investigator. We have attorneys who really care about clients. And so between us meeting with our clients, having open discussions with our clients, being honest with our clients, updating them anytime there is a significant development, good or bad, I think you invest in building trust early. And I think it pays dividends when you need it to, when things sometimes don't go the way you expect, which happens in serious criminal defense cases and serious litigation. We also ask our clients if they would allow us to provide updates to family members, and we're permitted by rules of ethics and professional responsibility in a way that's allowed, because sometimes you might have some sensitive information that you receive that you're not allowed to share with client's family. By law in California, you can't provide them with witnesses' contact information, addresses, things of that nature. But our clients depend on their families as support system. And so I don't think it's a good idea to leave the entire support network in the dark. I think it's good to update them so that they know work is being done. There is a strategy in place. This is the vision for how we're going to achieve our objective. And when people see what is actually happening, when they know the direction the case is going, I think that leads to much greater customer satisfaction and client satisfaction. It builds significantly more trust in the attorney and the attorney's entire legal team, and it leads to greater outcomes as a result.
Can you share with us how Emily's brother's case would have been handled differently by your team or with your model?
I think we would start representing Emily's brother by having honest conversations with him about what happened. We would research his background. We would try to find out what happened to this young man who grew up in a good family, whose father was a decorated veteran, who had resources and support that many other young people did not have. We would try to identify what went wrong. We would consult appropriate experts who would help us develop a greater understanding and solution to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again. And our experience, as well as significant amount of psychological research, shows that when you provide a reason together with an ask, you're far more likely to achieve that which you're seeking. And so plea negotiations are no different. If you explain your position appropriately, if you provide a reason for why you think a particular outcome is more justifiable than what the prosecutor, for example, or the judge is suggesting, if you support it with research, with significant mitigation, with an explanation of client's background and prospects for rehabilitation, that allows you to obtain different outcomes. If you do nothing, you shouldn't expect to get a different result. I really believe that legal outcomes we get are a direct reflection of the work that we invest in order to obtain them. So the less effort an attorney puts into the case, unless you get lucky, and sometimes you do, but unless you get very lucky and somebody just made you a good offer from the beginning, usually they don't fall from the sky. They're earned, and they're earned by careful consideration of your client's case, legal and factual research, trying to gain greater understanding into your client's background, and working up your case. If you don't invest in your client's case, you are not going to get an extraordinary outcome. You will get probably a passable or average outcome, the one that the system contemplates. And that's what happened in Emily's brother's case.
And how does representing one client with this holistic approach impact their family, the community, the system itself? I mean, there's a ripple effect here.
Absolutely. And that's what drives me and my team to apply it every single day. When you change one life, when you change the life of your client, you have to keep in mind that this is going to affect what happens to everybody else in their circle. You know, they will have parents, they will have grandparents, they will have neighbors, they will have boyfriends or girlfriends, cousins, other people who look at them and see that perhaps the problem that they were dealing with can be addressed, can be fixed. And so by doing the right thing for that one specific client, you're not only improving the client's legal situation, but you're potentially addressing things that cause somebody to have a rift with their family. You can reunite a lost child with parents or grandparents. You can bring back home somebody who disappeared on the streets, suffering with homelessness and addiction and mental illness. You can have that person become a role model in a recovery society or community. You can have that person become a professional or become gainfully employed. So absolutely, this does not stop at the dismissal of the case or your client's sentencing on lesser charges or better terms. It will continue to pay forward, and it will affect many other lives. And that's why we have to be so careful, because we are entrusted with our clients' fortunes, our clients' freedom, and our clients' lives. And what we do affects not only the client who may have screwed something up, who may have used some really bad judgment, who may have committed a crime, but also affects that wonderful grandma who was in your office shaking your head and asking you, Mr. Attorney, please do everything you can for my grandson. And that means
Mhm.
something to me. And so I always try to find connection with the people who I see. We have a saying that you don't have to like your client to do a good job, but it helps. And sometimes when I have a harder time building that connection with a client, I almost always see in one of their family members someone who reminds me of somebody in my family, in my circle. And that's what motivates me and propels me forward.
Finally, I know you care about elevating the legal profession and reaching out to younger lawyers. What lessons do you think Emily's story holds for people who aspire to practice criminal defense to prevent injustices like that felt by her brother and family?
I think we need someone like Emily to tell her story. I think that seeing is believing, and Emily is just an amazing example of how what happens to a person can affect people in their family, in their circle, in their community. Emily didn't do anything to deserve her dream of going to beauty school shattered. She didn't want to become an attorney. She chose to become an attorney to get her brother out of prison. So when we tell younger lawyers, or if we're going to a law school and we're talking to future criminal lawyers, whether district attorneys or defense attorneys, and we share the story of someone like Emily, hopefully that teaches them that they have to be conscientious in their work. They have to care about what they're doing, regardless whether you're on the defense side, whether you're on the prosecution side, whatever it is that you choose to do with your life, make sure you care about it. Do it with heart. Do it so that it matters. We choose to spend majority of our time doing our work. And if that's what we're going to be doing 50, 60 hours a week, away from our families, away from our children, let's make sure this is something that really matters to us. So whatever you do in life, I would tell younger lawyers, make sure it's something you really care about and you do it the right way. We also need to educate younger lawyers about the realities of daily practice in criminal courts. We need to talk to them about mental illness and how many people it's going to affect, substance abuse and how many people it's going to affect, basic statistics so they understand that 50 to 75% of all people they're going to encounter will suffer from substance abuse or mental health issues, homelessness, impulse control, and other related problems. And we need to also have training with younger lawyers once they begin their careers so we can introduce them to what different clients at different stages of their addiction or mental illness, whatever the underlying problem may be, will look like. And I think my approach, when used as part of a young attorney's training, does that. It forces a person to seek an understanding of why someone else is suffering, what can be done to alleviate that suffering, and how we can incorporate that in a final resolution of the case. And I think that makes you not only a better person, it makes you a better human being, and it does the same thing to your client.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. That's very impressive. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in to Counselor Beyond Conventional Defense with attorney William Pernik. To connect with William and his team, head to perniklaw.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We got lots of great stuff coming your way. William, always great chatting with you. Thanks so much for the time.
My pleasure. Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.